Before the show starts, this is a reminder to all our listeners that the podcast is an open discussion forum and not meant to be used as a source of direct professional help. We at Panic Stations UK would always urge anybody listening to go seek advice from their GP, that is their doctor, a counsellor or a therapist. The podcast is, however, a place for people to share experiences and realise that you are not alone. Due to the subject matter discussed in the shows, some episodes may have explicit language in. I warn listeners, as this is meant to be a realistic look at mental health. As such, you may find that some of the guests use some pretty colourful language. I ask all listeners just to freely accept this and to honour the guests that are on the show. It's their journey and it's their freedom of speech, and we at Panic Stations UK would never do anything to discourage that. Many thanks and enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to another episode of Panic Stations UK. This is the Mental Health Podcast and I'm your host Chris Jones, and obviously you've heard this before, or if you haven't heard it before, welcome to the show. If you've heard it before, great to have you back. Now, for those who've been following the shows on a weekly basis, you may go, hang on a second, isn't this supposed to be the episode where Jon continues his discussion about bipolar and mania and his struggles with depression? And it would have been. However, what I'm doing right now, and this is of great importance, and it is of great importance, that's why I'm doing it, is I'm interrupting the part 2 of the podcast, because part 2 of the podcast will be at the start of next week when it gets released now. Jon's been informed of this. I was talking to him about this as we were recording the podcast initially, and obviously I gave a fair warning in the previous episode that this might happen. I've had the honour, and it was an honour and a privilege to speak to a very, very special person. Not saying that Jon isn't special, because he is absolutely incredibly special, but I got to speak to somebody who was making a film project, and because of this he's currently doing a current project called Unload. It's a film about PTSD. It's post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay, so a lot of people might have heard about that, and it affects everybody. A lot of people think, it's all about just the forces, people who suffer extreme instances in the forces and witness things that give them these issues that stay with them for the rest of their lives, or affect them in such a profound way. It's not just the forces, although yes, the forces, very, very common. It's got a high percentage of people happening there. But it's also something that happens in everyday life, and it's something we really need to be aware of. And because of that, I think what the creator of these films, is a fella called Peter Carruthers, the creator of this film. He's doing a fantastic job. Unfortunately, because he's using Indiegogo to help fund the film, there's a very finite amount of time, which is hence why we've got a break in Jon's interviews, because we had it in 3 parts anyway, but that's why we're taking a break this week after part 1. And I apologise to anybody that was eager as hell to hear part 2, because trust me, it is going to be a doozy. Part 2 is fantastic. It was a great interview. It's been a fantastic thing to talk to Jon, but this really needs to get shoehorned into this week, because we're running out of time. We need to spread awareness, and spreading awareness means helping to raise money towards the film, and also as well, any money that's raised, even if it doesn't make its full amount, still gets used towards the film, so it's really important. So what I've done, I've taken a break from Jon's interview just so we can spread awareness of the film. It's called Unload. It's on Indiegogo.com. So if you go to www.indiegogo.com, spelling indie as in India, November, Delta, India, Echo, and then go is spelled golfoscar.com. You go there, have a look on the search engine bit, because you can find a film called Unload, all capitals, and that's Uniform, November, Lima, Oscar, Alpha, Delta. So Unload, and it's a film about PTSD and psychological therapy. Really important film. It's got a lot to say, and it's an incredibly meaningful and thought-provoking piece of film. And on the page, on the funding page for it, if you scroll down to the end of the film, he's done 2 other films which are really, really useful to watch. One is called Fallout, and while the Indiegogo options are there, you can watch that there. And the other is called Civvy Street. They're both being used to spread awareness about PTSD, and it's really good. And Sir Patrick Stewart's seen these films, folks, and he's going, yeah, it gives his thumbs up, because he's a big believer in discussing these kind of issues and things that have happened. So please give it some thought, donate, give it a look. Definitely worth a look. And we're going to just do an interview to Peter about the situation, so we're going to go over to that just in a few moments, and please enjoy it. Jon will be back next week, and obviously I know he'd support this, because being a big lover of film and creative independent cinema, he would totally back this call anyway, because it's making a film. It's a good platform, it's a good medium. So I'm going to stop waffling, and now you're going to hear the interview with myself and Peter Carruthers talking about his filmmaking, and his filmmaking towards PTSD suffering, and it's really fantastic. So enjoy. Right, so as promised, I've got a very special guest. We've interrupted our string of interviews with Jon Cross, and he's fully aware of that, and he's completely appreciative and supportive of that, simply because there's a very important project out there that needs to be sort of addressed, and it needs to be sort of chucked out there, and people need to be aware of it, and it's on a very small time scale, so we need to make sure that everybody's aware of it, and obviously if you can contribute, brilliant. So here we have with us today, our interview is with a man called Peter Carruthers, who is a writer and a filmmaker and a jack of all trades, and he's come up with some great projects. He's been linked to the project 50 Kisses with his contribution to it called Never Forget. He also did another short, I believe it's back in 2012, called Fallout. And the next one he's working on is a project called Unload. And these are films about PTSD. For those of you not aware of that, that's called it's not psychological therapy, it's called post-traumatic stress disorder. So it needs to be addressed, and it affects a lot of people from all walks of life. So with us today, here's Peter. Fantastic stuff from what I've seen so far. So hello, Peter, and how are you?
Hi, Chris. I'm not bad, thanks. How are you?
All good, all good. I'm doing well. I'm really excited and stoked for this interview, because I've got a lot of people that have been asking me for doing about PTSD. So just surprisingly, I got to see the link. Somebody, one of our listeners, put something on our page saying, "Look, are you aware of this?" And that's how I got made aware of you. And it was your Indiegogo.com project about Unload, because you're trying to raise awareness for it. So I was basically going to start the interview just asking a little bit, if you could just introduce yourself to the listeners, about a little bit who you are, a bit of your background that you're okay with, and just really what's led you to start doing filmmaking.
Okay, well, yeah, as you know, my name is Peter Carruthers. Just to go back a little bit, I did serve in the Royal Air Force for 7 years, between 96 and 2003. When I left that, I was an engineer for a few years, just sort of doing what you're supposed to do, earning the money, paying the bills, and actually just then had a bit of a kind of a moment of, what am I doing with my life? I want to make a difference in a way. and had a bit of a think about what I wanted to do. Did consider being a politician for about 5 seconds, but quickly saw sense with that one. I thought, and yeah, I think just from driving around a lot as a service engineer, being alone with my own thoughts, I tended to I was always a big fan of film, and I tended to just get lost in my thoughts and come up with little scenes that would match the music I was listening to in the car, that sort of thing. So I just decided, you know what, I had a few ideas that I was quite passionate about, and decided I wanted to be a writer. But then I didn't know what a writer was supposed to do, really, and what an actor needed from a writer. So I went along for some acting lessons just to kind of get a grip of what actors needed from a writer, really. And just within a few lessons, it was a bit of a eureka moment, should I say. Just the penny dropped, and it was, wow, this is what I want to do. Did the rest of this little introductory course, applied to drama school, got accepted, quit my job, got rid of the house, the car, and went to drama school for 3 years. Trained to be an actor, graduated 2009, and since then just been kind of gaining experience acting wise with theatre and short films mainly. Nothing that anyone will have probably seen, but after a while I started to get a little bit frustrated that the stuff I was given wasn't really what I wanted to talk about, and the writer in me was kind of itching away to get cracking again. And yeah, the first project I worked on was Fallout, and I obviously drew on my military experience to write that, because it was about a veteran with PTSD. And it was very much a personal project. I got some friends together who I'd worked with on other short films who I trusted. We had no money. I think the whole thing cost about £400, and that was all out of my own pocket. A lot of people giving a lot of time for nothing, and just being passionate about a project, really. And it was just genuinely a pet project, but a senior lecturer at Edge Hill University saw the film and said, could I use it to train my students? And I thought, wow, that's a real vote of confidence that it's accurate and that, we've got to the heart of it. And the more I shared it with people from that sector, from the health sector and the mental health environment, the more people said, this is exactly what we need. It's a 10-minute film. It shows you exactly what's going through someone's head, the way people live their life if they're suffering day to day with PTSD, particularly with the veteran angle. And it just gave people a way of empathizing. Wow. So that just went on from there, really. I started going to mental health conferences. I started going to veterans conferences and seminars and training sessions wherever I was asked to show it and wherever I thought it might be useful. And everywhere it went, it just kept gaining momentum. People kept saying, "Oh, this is the most we've learned all day just from that 10-minute film," and it was really, really rewarding. The fact that something I had made was changing things and helping people understand. People who work with veterans day to day and work in mental health day to day were saying it had helped them, and I was like, wow, that's great. I want to do more of that. I should say that the mental health thing wasn't just an accident. It's something I've been passionate about for quite a while. I've always been fascinated with what makes us tick and about I think the perception of society of what's normal and what isn't. I read a book when I was studying to be an actor called Impro by Keith Johnston, and I recommend it to any budding actor or anyone who just wants to understand the way we play and the way we censor ourselves, I think, as adults. And he said that basically everyone is mad, for want of a better word. It's just the ones that talk about it that get labelled. And I thought that was great. I thought, wow. Yeah, I like that. That clicks with me. And I think it just started me thinking more and more about the things that you observe about your own behaviour and about other people's behaviour that people might say, oh, that's crazy, that's weird, that's odd, that's strange. You shouldn't, you should just things that kind of distance themselves from society. And then I when I left uni to pay the bills, I got a job at NHS Direct. So I was on the phones as a health advisor. And quite often, particularly late at night, you would get a lot of mental health related calls, particularly people who were suicidal, and so I spent a lot of time talking to people with mental health problems, and not in a morose way. I really enjoyed getting those calls because I knew that I would have not the patience as such. I just think that I was ready to talk to people and listen to them and not just freak out like some people do, and just to listen to them as human beings and with, something that needed some help with, and that was really rewarding for me, and it just fueled my passion for it and my interest in it, really. So yeah, it's just something that as time's gone on, I've become more and more involved in, and wanting to break down that stigma, increase the understanding and the awareness and the empathy for people who are quite often ostracized by society because of whether it's a genuine mental health problem or because they're deemed as odd or crazy or whatever kind of non-PC word you want to put to it. So I think I've probably rambled enough there, but that's the basic background to my story.
I think that's absolutely fantastic. It's interesting because, weirdly enough, some listeners won't know this, but I actually come from an acting background. I actually went to university to study film and drama production. So I did film and drama production before I ended up doing the career that I'm currently in, and basically, I left there and I thought, well, I need to have something as a backup career. I thought I needed something as a backup career because what I wanted to do was have a situation where if I didn't get to where I wanted to go, I could have a career in something I equally gave a damn about, and it was the idea of helping people. And I ended up working for an out-of-hours doctor's answering service at one point. Very much like yourself, because I did a lot of overnight shifts. I generally did the late night shifts over a weekend. I would be privy to a lot of the calls where people would call in, and you'd get, like you say, quite rightly, you would get people with mental health issues, severe depression, things like that, calling in and asking for advice because at that time of the night, and when they're so low because they're up generally at that time anyway, they a lot of people were calling in because sometimes it was just to hear a friendly voice. And it was interesting that you should say that, because I was like, wow, that's like a checklist of the things that I've done as well. Apart from obviously the forces and the engineering, I think it's incredibly brave of you to commit to something like just go, you know what, this is what I want to do in my life, and I think that's incredible. And the idea that you've gone into writing and filmmaking. I mean, I got to see there's some of your show reel available on your website, and I got to see some really nice stuff. I believe that's from Fallout, and just there's some really, really interesting stuff. And right, this is going to sound really weird, but when I see people who go, "Oh, I want to be an actor," having been in that circle of people where you're being reviewed and constantly assessed on ability, seeing your performances in, from what I've seen so far, seeing your performances look really professional, if you don't mind me saying so. I think that I honestly, generally, and I'm not just saying this because you're a guest on the show, I was actually set back by going, wow, that's actually, I was expecting, and with the greatest respect, sometimes you think, well, it might turn out a bit amateurish. Doesn't look amateurish in the slightest. It looks like I was watching it, and the filmmaking, obviously, I think people have been using the DSLR cameras, which are really, really great cameras. I love them. And with some of the stuff that I was seeing, I saw the 50 Kisses stuff, the Never Forget, and I was like, wow, that's brilliant. And I've also got a friend who did some stuff and Never Forget, a guy called Dan Kaiser, and he's like family to me. He's one of my best friends in the world. And
right. Yeah. Which one did Dan do? The name rings a bell, actually.
It was funny you should say that. Now he's going to go mental because I don't have it to hand and I don't know off the top of my head. It's like, yeah, man, okay. I love him like a brother. Don't know the name of his part from 50 Kisses. He was definitely in it, and I've really, and it sounds really bad because I want to support him for it, but I know he was definitely in it, and I haven't had the chance to check out the name of it, and it's going to jump into my head after I've done this interview, which will really annoy me.
You'll just have to just edit it and just.
I'll edit it. Really
yes,
yes.
And this one. And
so in the middle of the interview,
and I'll just give you this now. I'll just say, yes, I saw that. It was one of my favourite ones. There you go, and you can just put that in.
Brilliant. Now I can do that now. So what they'll do in the middle of the thing, he'll just a completely different sound quality version of me going, "It is this," and then he'll go straight back and go, "Oh yeah, I saw that." But yeah, it was really interesting. A great project actually. 50 Kisses, a really interesting one for filmmakers across the country. Just the idea of people submitting written work, and it's just little scenes to make a ginormous film, and it was all about. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's all about first kisses or just kisses, and like a little 2 pages worth of writing.
It was basically something that was alerted. I was alerted to it by my girlfriend, and it was when I mean, Fallout was my only piece of work that I'd produced at this point, and this is a couple of years ago now. And yeah, it was basically you had to write a 2-page script in standard format that featured one kiss and was set on Valentine's Day. And that was the only remit you had. It could be anything. It could be a horror. It could be a romance. It could be an action thriller. Anything. But as long as you got a story told in 2 pages, and there was, I think, nearly 2,000 entries.
Wow.
And it was great that one of mine was chosen as one of the 50. I actually put 2 in, so so you were allowed to put 2 in. I actually thought the other one might have a better chance, but no, they went for the really grim one, much to the horror of my filmmaking team because they wanted to make something a bit cheerier. But yeah, I mean, thank you very much for what you said about the quality of the films. At the end of the day, you can't do it on your own. It's about the team that you've got around you, and with Fallout. In the first case, I had Dan Price, he was the director on that one. He's a fantastic camera operator and fantastic editor. He's got a real eye for it, and we worked really well together because it was something I was quite new to, the production side. I'd only ever been an actor, so I was the kind of guy that would just turn up, do my acting, and then go away and complain about how long it had taken before I got to see it. And then I suddenly found out why it takes so long before you get to see your work. And also a really good friend of mine, Ash Tidball, who did the sound design on Fallout, which was absolutely crucial to it. It really makes the film. And Ash ended up being the director on my next film about Veteran Civvy Street, which we did last year. Which is the first thing that I was commissioned to do by the NHS off the back of Fallout.
Wow!
So that's kind of like that got the ball rolling really. And so I've been working with Ash since really. And he's the director of photography for Unload for the new one. I'm going to be the director on this one. And we're also getting my good friend Laura Lindsay, who. She was my writing partner in a theatre piece that I did recently called Hidden, which we took to Edinburgh and we toured it all over the UK. It did really well. And we wrote it together, we performed it together. Basically, Laura knows my acting and its strengths and weaknesses like no one else. So I've decided to get her on board, and I'm really glad that she's agreed to come on board, just to basically stand in the room and make sure I'm not cheating and make sure that I'm doing my best, because I like the typical greedy actor. I've cast myself as the lead in this, and so I need someone watching from behind the camera to make sure I'm not just to keep me on my game. I think, because I think that's the difficulty with when you're doing all those jobs at once. When you're directing, writing, producing, acting, it's to kind of sometimes the acting gets lost because you've got to focus on everything else. And I think I got away with it with Fallout and Civvy Street, but I really want this next one to be another step up to be, just no weaknesses. We've got an amazing cast. I've been really blown away by how keen people are to get involved. And it's, just really exciting project.
Well, I saw, obviously, when the Civvy Street one, I haven't had a chance to see. And I again missed that one out on your introduction, but if that was the first one, am I right in saying Civvy Street's the one that, according to the actual show reel for the Indiegogo crowdfunding, that's the one? Is it Sir Patrick Stewart saw?
He's actually seen both of them.
Wow.
Basically, I don't know if you remember last year, you must have done, when the big thing went viral about Sir Patrick Stewart talking about PTSD and domestic abuse at the Comic-Con. And I thought, wow, he's really passionate about this, and he's got a real connection to it. So what I did was, I mean, at this point, I'm trying to think, had we finished Civvy Street? I think we were just about to finish Civvy Street, and I thought, do you know what? Why not try and get in touch with his agent and get his agent to pass on a link to see Fallout, just to say, look, this is a film that's doing well here and in the States. I think it'd be interesting for you to see. And just did that. Managed to get through to his agent through about three other agents, and she agreed to pass it on to her. And I thought that'll be it. There'll be nothing more to it. And I was actually up in Edinburgh doing Hidden at the Fringe just so this time last year, and I was just queuing up for a hot chocolate near the bridge and with my girlfriend, and just sort of chilling out after the show, and just phone buzzed, and an email came up from Patrick Stewart saying, I saw your film and thought it was extremely powerful, well done. And I was like,
oh wow,
it just took a second or two for it to sink in. And I thought, wow, I mean, this is a guy that any actor idolizes, as one of the top professionals that, acting today. And and especially because he's obviously got this link to combat stress, the charity, and to PTSD, which was wonderful. And I thought, do you know what? In for a penny, in for a pound. I started replying and saying, "Oh, it's great. I wonder if you'd like to see Civvy Street. Here's the link." And he said he really enjoyed that one as well. And we just kept now and again just sending the odd email. And then he offered to meet me for a chat. He was living in New York at the time, so I was actually considering going out to New York to meet him.
Oh my God!
And I actually went to Washington this year for the second time to show Civvy Street at a festival in over there.
Am I right saying that's the GI? Sorry to interrupt. It's the GI Film Festival.
That's right, the GI Film Festival, which it's a film festival that they call it Sundance for the Troops. It's very patriotic, it's very very American, but it's great. It's a real feel good festival. It's the only festival I've been to where it feels like it's about the military and the veterans first, and it's about the film second. And it's really nice that everyone's got a togetherness. There's no kind of backbiting and bitching and people trying to get their film seen more than another. It's just everyone's really supportive. But yeah, I was going out there for the second time with Civvy Street, and I was hopefully going to bump into him. He said he was doing promotion for X-Men, but might be able to meet me. So it was just more and more surreal.
It does sound surreal, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Imagine that.
But then in the end, it didn't quite work out. But I did get to meet him in July in London.
Wow.
And spent a good hour sat chatting with him about the script for the new film, and about with him giving me advice on the script and ways to move forwards, and it just giving me a pat on the back for what I've been doing, which is just gold. You can't ever buy that. It's great, and he's such a busy guy, as you know.
Yeah, definitely.
And it just gives you a nice boost.
I'd imagine, yeah, just that really surreal moment when Sir Patrick Stewart turns around and goes, "Actually, by the way, I'm doing some for a little film I'm doing. You've probably not heard of it. It's called X-Men: Days of Future Past. And I was just wondering whether or not you could, fit me in." I'm like, "What? That's incredible." And
yeah, I did ask him if he wanted to be in the new film, and bless him, he replied by saying, "Thank you for thinking of me." Which was very humble.
Nice.
But yeah, as you can imagine, he's unavailable. So
yeah. You never know. You never know. It's always worth an ask. And he seems like such an incredibly nice guy.
He's a lovely chap. Yeah, lovely chap.
Sorry, I'm going to break my professionalism right now to have a little bit of a geek out, because I'm a huge nerd. So the idea of you speaking to Professor X, stroke, Jean-Luc Picard, stroke, Dune, every other film under the sun is a big thing for me. So I'll compose myself and back to professional mode, or semi-professional. Yeah, that's incredible. And the idea of it being a sort of a big boost, and a massive moral boost, because really... I was saying this before. I had a chance to meet Carrie Fisher, and I got to meet Carrie Fisher. She was doing a signing in the London Film and Comic Con, and I, obviously being a huge nerd, thought, right, okay, I'll get my get a Star Wars poster signed, a Return of the Jedi one done. And as I met her, one of the things I said, I explained to her very quickly because she was incredibly busy signing so much. And I mean, it's not in the same rooms or the worlds are actually meeting Sir Patrick Stewart. But one of the things I did get a chance to say...
I don't know. I'd be excited about meeting Carrie Fisher.
Oh, no, trust me, I was big time excited for meeting Carrie Fisher. And one of the things I said, look, you know, because she's been very, very open about her own issues with mental health problems, like she's had diagnosed bipolar, manic depression. She's been committed. On top of being committed as well, she's had substance abuse issues on and off throughout the years. And it's incredibly brave because we live in such a... our society both amazes me and terrifies me in the respects that we have moments where we really shine, where human kindness is so incredible and so wonderful and encompassing that you have moments like when Sir Patrick went, well done, to give the people around you the boost they need when they've worked so hard, and that acknowledgement and the kindness and the genuine sort of positive promotion saying, look, you can do this, this is absolutely fantastic, well done. And then we also live, sadly, in a time where people can be very nonchalant and go whatever. Now, certainly not for your endeavours, but like certainly when it comes to being open about mental health. And with the issue, like with what happened with Carrie Fisher, I'm absolutely certain, being so open about the issues that she's had and so sort of forthright, it's definitely taken its toll on her career in certain respects. Now, she's a very, very well-respected author, script writer, you know, actress still. She still is. But I think being so open about it can close a lot of doors as well as open them. And I think now we're being a bit more open about things, but back then, certainly a lot harder. And when I met her...
and... Sorry, go on.
No, go for it.
No, I mean, I was going to say that it's interesting because I mean she did the autobiographical film as well, didn't she? I can't remember what it was called, but where Meryl Streep played her.
Postcards from the Edge.
Is that what it is?
Yeah,
I'm terrible,
really good.
Terrible with titles. Fantastic film, and I thought that's really great. Someone just saying this is what it is, and I'm not afraid to talk about it. I don't care what you think. And I think that taboo needs to be broken so many times before people finally get it, and that's why I think things like Time to Talk, Time for Change are so important, and obviously they're just scratching the surface, but that's why I think film has this power that, I mean, I call it forced empathy. If you watch a film, you're kind of forced to spend whatever time, whatever the duration is, in that person's shoes, and you're forced to kind of think about, you know, what would it be like if I was in that situation? And that's what I try to do with my work anyway. And I think that's what helps people go, okay, it's not a list of symptoms on a piece of paper. Yeah. It's a person, it's a human being, and it's not another person, it's not some other strange group of people that, you know, have mental health problems. It's everyone. Everyone has mental health, good or bad. And that's the message that needs to be just blasted right across the world.
Yeah, definitely.
Just to break this stigma and this taboo about it. I mean, I do a lot of work, particularly with veterans and men's mental health, and this expectation for men to be strong and to be and to just stand up and grit and get on with it. And I think what's good in a way, although there's been differing qualities of coverage, I think with the recent sad story about Robin Williams, is that it has at least got people to think about men's mental health and depression and suicide, and the statistics are just so shocking.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And I just hope that continues, really. I mean, it shouldn't take the death of a celebrity for people to talk about it, and that's something that I really want to work on. Just not just with men, obviously. I'm interested in all not just mental health either, to be honest. It's basically anything where a group of people are ostracized from society. That's what I'm passionate about just at the moment. This is kind of where my where my sort of aim seems to be.
To be ruthlessly honest, though, that's a good aim to have. You're helping your fellow humans. You know, this is all good. I mean, what a great phrase, forced empathy. I think that's a really great phrase. I think that's excellent. And you're right. There's it promotes a emotional response, film does, and I think it's a great
and just getting back to what you said about Carrie Fisher, about talking about her own experiences. What's interesting is that with Fallout and Civvy Street, there's quite a lot of people assume that it's autobiographical, that I'm writing about my own experiences, and I take that as a compliment. That it looks like I've got some sort of insight into it, but the reality is I had quite an easy time in the forces. I didn't really see any kind of traumatic experience or anything. I've suffered with mild depression and anxiety now and again, and I still take mild antidepressants, which I'm always quite happy to talk about, because that's the whole point. It shouldn't be a big issue to mention it. It's just, it's like saying you've got bad joints or something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah. But that I think that, I don't know, sometimes I wonder whether to leave people assuming that, because they seem to have more admiration for the work. It's a strange one, really. I always will correct them if I get a chance. But sometimes it's just so awkward when someone comes up to you after a screening or after a performance and shakes your hand and says, I think you're so brave to be up there doing that, and then tell you about their own story. And then I think, I feel bad now saying I've not actually been through what you've been through. It's a real strange one.
But on the flip side about that is the fact that it's really interesting, because that was something I was going to literally just very quick, well, not very quickly, I was going to ask you about. I was going to put that on a pin on that just for a second, just quickly finish off the Carrie Fisher thing by just saying about what happened was, I mentioned to her, I said, I think you're incredibly brave for being so open and honest about the mental health issues that you've had. And she went, you know what, somebody's got to do it. And she was like going, brave. And I explained about the podcast, and I explained that my own issues of anxiety and depression, and the fact that I'm on citalopram and all these kind of things. And she turned around and she just went, she goes, you know what, you're a hero. And I was like, okay, but so that's a bit, okay. Part of me is like, yes, Princess Leia just called me a hero. But the other part is
that'll do.
Yeah, that'll do. But the other part is obviously me going, well, I'm not really a hero. I'm just being open about it. And then she went, well, we're really brave. We're the brave ones. We're the heroes and all that stuff. And then when she said we're the heroes, I thought she's got a point about the people that have a platform and use it responsibly to turn around and mention about the issues that are out there. And I think, like you quite rightly said about the platform of media, we live in a society that we're very media driven, and film is a fantastic platform, like you quite rightly said, about to express these issues. I mean, I'm not being funny. If we can be in a society where we have gossip magazines and God knows what, talking about the way people look, and I mean, it's all these different things that we sort of regulate and look at in press and media and things like that. I think that if we can do that at the same time, if we can use that as for a positive force like you're doing, that's tremendous. And I think as well, when you've been putting the pin out of the conversation we were just saying before and carrying it on, like when you were saying about when people have come up to you with your performance, what a great sort of response to have for you as an actor and you as a writer, that the actual performance and the work that you've put out there has touched somebody on such a level that they have felt brave enough to come forward and explain stuff. I can totally appreciate what you're saying. It must be a bit awkward when you're like, well, actually, no, I didn't have those things.
Actually, I made it up. Yeah, it's basically. I mean, obviously, there's more to it than that, but
yeah, of course.
Yeah, it can be strange. I think particularly because with Civvy Street and with Unload, they started life as theatrical monologues. And I remember I did perform the theatrical version of Civvy Street in Long Island, New York, before I went up to the GI Film Festival that year. And as I started performing it, and the opening lines were, I passed basic training as the best recruit, and someone on the front row nodded and said, "Oh, well done." And I was like, Oh dear. So this person thinks I'm telling my story, and it's people who perhaps aren't quite used to the medium or the nature of drama,
Yeah.
and that's great though that you can reach people like that and get people thinking about it. So it's an interesting one. The reactions are always fascinating, and to be honest, it's the discussions that we have after showing the films. I always try to get to as many of the screenings as I can, just to be there for the Q to facilitate a Q&A session at the end, because that's the point. It's about getting people to say, well, I thought this and I noticed this and I noticed that, and getting a bit of a debate going. And that's the whole point of the film. It's not about just putting it out there and everyone saying, "Oh, I really like that," or "That was really good." It's about provoking that debate, getting people talking about it, breaking that taboo. I know I keep banging the drum, but
No,
that's
no, it's
the
no.
the
I
whole
totally
point.
agree. This is the whole
Mm,
point of this show.
Yeah,
Um,
well, yeah, good point.
it's all good. It's all good, Peter. I think you're brilliant for doing that. What I was going to ask, interestingly, because you come from a forces background, you mentioned before, it's very much you kind of have a, I don't want to say lad culture per se, but certainly a man up, because that you come from a background which is quite interesting. I was going to ask, obviously you have your basic training, and the whole purpose of your basic training in forces. I have other friends that have been in the force and things like that, and from what I gather, the idea is they break you down and rebuild you. So the whole point is they break you down, rebuild you as a unit to work with other people that you're working with, and then you kind of
Mm.
you almost like you rally against the drill sergeants. You're like, well, you're the enemy, sort of almost. I mean, how much of that is true? How much did you find that like? Did that any of that kind of creep into you mentally, if you don't mind me asking?
Um, I th- I think it depends in which service you're in, for one thing.
Mm.
Because I mean, with the kind of the macho nature, anyone from the army listening, when I say I served in the Air Force, they just laugh and say, "Well, you didn't really serve then, did you?" While they were intense, we were in hotels. That kind of those are the kind of jokes that keep coming around. But
Yeah.
I mean, the basic training for me was 8 weeks, and yeah, it was tough. You were deliberately sleep deprived and pushed to your limits physically and energy wise. Uh, but I don't know. I think there's some people that just got it and just saw what was going on and could observe it kind of externally, and some people that took it very personally. And I think it depended on maybe your character, where you've come from, and I mean, I remember some of the lads when I trained getting really upset. Like, why is the corporal picking on me day in, day out? Why is he still saying that my kit isn't good enough and that my drill isn't good enough? And I was just sort of laughing in a way, saying, it's not because he doesn't like you. It's his job. It's his job to
Yeah.
to find problems and to knock you down. And then once you realize that everything you've ever learned is wrong, and they can teach you how to be um, a soldier, or basically that's what your basic training is to teach you to do, and to follow and to trust what you're told, to not question it, and the fact that when you do exactly as you're told, you're congratulated, and that's the point. It's about learning not to question it, and I think it depends on the background. I mean, I think with the Air Force, quite often get to recruit people that have perhaps perform better academically, come from maybe, I'm very careful what I say here, but maybe come from more privileged backgrounds. Not that I came from a privileged background as such, but I did okay at school. I got
Mm.
all my GCSEs, and I had a decent upbringing, and the fact that the army quite often, I wouldn't say criticise, but yeah, some people do criticise that they quite often recruit from the more uh, sort of distressed parts of society, where people haven't got anywhere else to go, where they're perhaps leaving home because they've got family problems, because all their friends are involved in crime and they don't want to get involved in it, or they have just managed to avoid getting caught by the police and don't want to get caught. And there's a lot of people, I think, that particularly join like the infantry, for example, in the army, where it's you're just a foot soldier, and your job is to kill the enemy. That's the whole point, and those are your skills. And the fact that these guys are the ones that are probably most likely to face trauma are the ones that have probably most likely experienced trauma in their childhood, more than anyone else. And a lot of the research I've been doing with Pennine Care Trust, who commissioned this latest film, Unload, when I talked to their specialist therapist, they said that from the work they've done with veterans, they found that around 9 in 10 of veterans that suffer with post-traumatic stress disorder have suffered trauma in childhood. So there's a warning sign. There's something that straight away you should be looking out for. And that's why there's quite often a lot of calls for people to be screened when they join the forces, to make sure that they are in the right place to deal with what they're going to have to face, really.
Yeah, because I suppose in, like, say, an emergency service like fire service or an ambulance service or I know, the police or something like that, what you have there is, even though they're putting you in situations where you will be seeing trauma, but you'll also see things that are less traumatic, obviously. But with the forces, there's no chance where you get to sit down and talk to people a bit more. I think there's less chance to talk to somebody, and I think less chance to actually have moments in your job where you can go, okay, well, there's this, and this, because obviously you're thrown out there into these combat situations, which would are obviously completely different than the kind of things you would see in the streets of your home countries and things.
I think it's getting better. It's getting better slowly. They do have a lot of systems in place that weren't there not so long ago. There's something called TRIM, which is Trauma Risk Management, which basically a dedicated non-commissioned officer will be trained up to be the responsible for TRIM, and will debrief the people in their platoon and whatever, just to and just be on the lookout for signs of any kind of mental health problems. The problem is that you've still got that mentality throughout much of the forces, that just lingering stigma that you've got to be strong. You don't want to be the weak link in your team. And I remember seeing a documentary not so long ago where someone was doing TRIM, and this was with a documentary film crew watching them, and it was, the sergeant said, okay, it's that time of the month when I need to ask if any of you are going crazy, hearing voices and seeing things in the dark. Woo! And they were all had a good laugh about it. And he's like, right, okay, anyone? No? Right, good. Tick, 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 done. And that's not the kind of environment that you want to nurture
No,
to make it easy to come forward. And I'm sure it's not like that all the way through. I'm sure there's a lot of people that take it seriously, but there is still a residue of that, I think, and this sense that you need to be strong. And there's also the fear that if you get diagnosed with a mental health problem, that suddenly that might be the end of your career. It isn't necessarily the case, but it is a risk. You might be medically downgraded, you might be medically discharged, and then suddenly, what have you got? You've lost everything that you love. A lot of the people in the army love it. They love the family environment, they love the career, they love the buzz, they love the fact that everything is taken care of for them. And then suddenly you're diagnosed with a mental health problem, you're discharged, with or without treatment, depending on whether you've got a proper diagnosis or not. It really does depend where people go as well. And suddenly you've not got the support of your comrades, and you're probably back into the area where you wanted to get away from in the first place. Possibly in a family that you don't want to be in, an area that you don't want to be in, where there's low employment and low public spending, and it's all a vicious circle that's only going to get worse, unfortunately, because of the incubation period that exists before PTSD signs quite often show when people leave the forces. And with all the people that have served in Afghanistan and Iraq, there's a lot of people that will be under the radar at the moment. And unfortunately, with the social pressures, quite often in some of these more deprived areas, are just going to add to that time bomb in a way.
Yeah, of course, and especially with the cuts. There's so many cuts in these in the services and what they're doing.
Mm.
I think they're playing personally, and it sounds very dramatic to say such a thing. I think they're juggling live hand grenades here because
Mm.
essentially taking away um, mental health services and for people when they reintegrate into society, or but people who are already in society who are finding it on a waiting list for months on end to see somebody. That is where the risk gets, because it's only going to make it longer waiting times if the services still exist afterwards, and that's down to budget
Yeah,
cuts, which is it's a really bad thing. So it's quite frightening thinking that that could happen, and especially with the forces, like you say, there's a massive risk with all the deployment in places like Afghanistan and things like that. Obviously, these, like you say, the incubation period for PTSD, PTSD sufferers, that's stuff that will happen after the fact, isn't it? And yeah,
absolutely. Well, combat stress, I can't remember the exact number, but they say that the typical incubation period is between sort of 7 and 13, 14 years after leaving service. So, someone could leave the service apparently as right as rain, but with some sort of coping strategies to cope with whatever that they've dealt with. There may be a trigger along the line in their civilian life that, just takes them back to that trauma that they've not processed, and suddenly the coping mechanisms, quite often self-medication with alcohol, just aren't able to cut it anymore, and it just becomes this really urgent problem, and it is one of those things that the quicker you catch PTSD and the quicker you treat PTSD, the easier it is to help people, because as
yeah,
soon as they've had it for I think it's 6 months when it if it's after, is it 6 months? I think it is. Once you've had PTSD for 6 months, it becomes complex PTSD. I may be wrong in that. That's just my memory trying its best. And quite often, the generally held belief is that once you have complex PTSD, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to ever fully recover from it. There are, with therapy and the right kind of help, you can learn to cope with it and live with it, but it just won't leave you. And so those delays, quite often there's a delay before any man, never mind a veteran, will go to the GP to ask for help. But then you've got the delay to get to the therapist. And like any therapy, it may not be the right therapist that you meet first of all. It could be the third or fourth therapist that you meet that you actually click with, or a certain kind of therapy, whether it's CBT, MDR, or art therapy, or any of the things that are recognised as helpful for PTSD. You really have got a ticking time bomb that needs to be dealt with quickly.
yeah, of course. And I mean, like you say, with the complexity, obviously, it's by that point when it gets put to a certain point that you've been there for so long, it becomes integrated into part of the personality of the person, and that's what's a lot harder to separate. And like you say,
Yeah.
if impossible, and you find yourself in a situation, that happens with not just with PTSD, but it also happens with people with depression, anxiety, borderline personality disorders, things like that, OCD. A lot of things where it becomes so integrated into their personality that it becomes less about trying to, and I'm using air quotes when I say this, like fix the problem, but it becomes more about learning to live and cope with your day-to-day lives with it. And that's what I think some people forget, that when people get treatment, when they've had breakdowns and things like that, and they come back to work in place environments and things like that, and they're trying to adjust, and they've gone through a very complex, very in-depth and very internal struggle. And when they come back from all this, people think, well, they've had all this stuff, they've had therapy, they're fine now, aren't they? And it's not as easy as that, because obviously there can be relapses, and it's a very, very complicated situation. And a lot of people can find suffering with these things for their entire lives. And like you say, quite rightly, learning to just live with those kind of situations. Now, when you were talking before about, obviously you've been commissioned to do all these films. It's fantastic, absolutely fantastic. By the way, the fact that you're being recognised, and the positive impact of your work is phenomenal, because you're being able to go to these places like America and do these stage shows, and people are opening up, which is, again, really, really positive, brilliant things about your work. When it came to do all the research to PTSD, what did you find? What was, I mean, obviously you come from a forces background, and we've kind of touched upon that, and obviously the fact that you wanted to go into filmmaking and writing and acting. When you decided, right, I'm going to start doing about PTSD, what did you do? What was your initial research for this? How did you come across this kind of stuff?
Well, what it was, I was actually asked as an actor to be in another film by a friend of mine called Will Herbert, which was again about PTSD, and he asked me to help a little with the writing process because of a military background, and obviously I was really pleased because writing was something I wanted to get into a bit more, so I jumped at the chance and did a lot of research, and I think what I was struck by was just how much. How many stories there were out there. Just a quick search on the internet, and you can get dozens and dozens of case studies and interviews, and people just willing to talk about their experiences and what it's like. And I was kind of thrown a little bit by wow, I can't believe I wasn't aware of this. So I gathered all this research together and I presented it to Will, and some of it was integrated into the film, but I think I came away from that film thinking I want to do something myself now about this, with the research that I've done. And I was involved with a couple of other filmmakers, and we were looking for a simple project to do, and I volunteered to write something. And it was just one of those things really that was on my mind at the time, and I started writing about it. And I showed the first draft of the script to a veteran who'd suffered, and he gave me some feedback, but he was really happy with what it was like and saying that it was representative. And it wasn't just military PTSD that I looked into. I did a lot. There was one case study about a guy who'd witnessed an industrial accident at work, and his life had just spiraled from that point. It was really, really heartbreaking to read this quite clinical case study. It was really, really tough. And so like I say, it wasn't just the military side. It obviously PTSD, people do think about the military, but it applies to anyone. I mean, I showed the film and the script to a friend of mine who I obviously won't give away her name, but she was the victim of sexual assault when she was traveling, and she'd suffered with PTSD, and she saw the script and saw the film and said, yeah, that's what it was like. So it is a common thing. I think the military side gets a lot of attention, but PTSD is something that can be experienced by anyone. And so it was a mixture of reading about it and interviewing a couple of people. But I think the most important thing, and I think the reason it works, is because I was prepared to think, what would it be like if I was in that situation? How would I feel? What would I do? And just be honest, not just think about what someone else would do. Think about what I would do. And okay, if I was struggling and getting these flashbacks and hearing these noises and having these repetitive images, these intrusive images, and this anxiety and suspicion of people around me, and it just you get all these. As an actor, you talk about given circumstances. You put these circumstances in place and you react to them. And I think that's how I kind of write in a way. I do it from an actor's perspective. It's kind of like improvising in a way. You get the character and you get the situation, and then you write what would happen if you were there. And I think that's what makes it a human experience. And that's certainly the feedback I get from people that watch my work. So I'm not going to change that. That's something I'm going to stick with.
No, of course not. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like you quite rightly said, hopefully there's going to be another interview with a PTSD sufferer,
Mm-hmm.
I say another another interview. Let me rephrase that because obviously you've just said you don't suffer from it. Hang on, put my teeth and my brain in gear. Right, yeah, we're going to have hopefully a bit later on in the show's history in the next couple of weeks or so. If we've just in the discussion period, hopefully going to have somebody who suffers from PTSD. From a civilian point of view, like you say, because quite rightly, they're the most highlighted aspects of PTSD is the stuff from the forces perspective because it's so massive and so impactful, and people are starting to notice it a hell of a lot. And I mean, if you look at some of the literature and the media out there prior to that about like PTSD, in a way, the album Pink Floyd The Wall, there are elements of that hark back to the Second World War, and a family suffering from the loss of a father, and like you say, a traumatic childhood, and then you look at films like Catch-22, which highlight quite eloquently the idea of you've got to kind of like man up and stuff in the military and things like that, but you know, to get out of active duty because you're not insane, because clearly you're looking at some seriously nasty stuff, and to get out of that you have to go to a medical assessment for your mental stability. And obviously if you're showing you're insane, you need to be hospitalised. However, if you're showing you're insane, that means you're clever enough to realise that doing what you're about to do is stupid, so therefore you're not insane, and that catch-22 sort of thing. And like I think you're quite right. It does. There's a lot of it in lots of walks of life. The people, fire service get it a lot. The police force and the ambulance service get PTSD a lot because obviously the stuff they see. But again, it doesn't have to be forces exclusive. It can be people that have suffered severe issues from childhood, and not even in childhood, like a moment that's happened and it's caused like this moment of stress that's connected with the feelings they get afterwards. And obviously it's very important to recognise that.
And quite often it's not PTSD either. It's I mean, the most common mental health disorder, which is, to be honest, it's not a word I particularly like, but because it's kind of it says you're not supposed to react like that. Well, how are you supposed to react? But the most common mental health problem that people suffer after trauma, particularly with the military, and I'm assuming it's the same for all walks of life, is anxiety and depression. By far more common than PTSD.
Oh, definitely.
I think PTSD gets the sexy headlines because people think the flashbacks are interesting for some reason. But the anxiety and depression, and often OCD and all sorts of things related to trauma, can be just as imprisoning for people, if that's a word, that keep people locked in their houses and locked away from society and until they disappear, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, this is it. Now, going to your current projects, because obviously you've talked a little bit about 50 Kisses We'll Never Forget. We've obviously talked about Fallout. And then we briefly touched upon Civvy Street. Unload. This is your current one, okay? Now, this is one of the reasons I wanted to get this interview out so quickly. So poor Peter was getting bombarded by emails me going, "Do you want to be on the show? You want to be on the show? This is great. Well, I've just seen this. I really think you should talk about it on the show." All this stuff. So I'm bombarding poor Peter with all this stuff, and yeah, it was basically because what I had initially saw, how I was introduced to Peter's work was I was given a link that was put onto the Panic Station's UK Facebook page, and it was the Indiegogo crowdsource funding for his project Unload, and I got to see what he'd been doing. And then obviously when the video that plays on the page that explains a little bit about yourself, your background in filmmaking and your responses and what you're trying to do, it briefly touches upon the other stuff that you've done, the other work. And that was the thing that really opened my eyes, going, wow, this guy's done a hell of a lot. And this is really impressive, and obviously getting to check a bit more about that. Now, where are you with Unload? First off, what's just touch about a little bit about what Unload is, and if you could.
Well, go on, sorry.
Oh, yeah, sorry. And if you could, just basically, if you just explain to the listeners what you're trying to do currently with Indiegogo and how they might be able to help?
Okay, well, basically, I was asked by there's a service called the Military Veteran Service, which is an NHS-run pilot that covers the whole of the Northwest, and they're funded by Pennine Care Trust. Basically, they provide veteran-specific therapy in the IAPT model, which I'm not sure if you are, the Improving Access to Psychological Therapy.
Okay.
But it's a military veteran-specific service. So they looked at the IAP model and they looked at how they could model that specifically to work for veterans. And it's just been, the results have been fantastic. They've won national awards for their results. They've outstripped any other IAP service results with their outcomes with it. So it's a really, really great service, the way they handle it. And I was asked by them to prepare a monologue for an event that they were holding to promote their service and talk about the success and to basically try and get an extension to the pilot. So I was able to, I did a bit of research about the service. I went in to the service and talked to all the therapists, and I was also able to talk to some of the clients that were going through therapy at the time or had been through therapy that wanted to share their experiences. And that was amazingly useful. And perhaps the most insightful part was I was able to do a, what's the word? I was basically able to go through the therapy system in character, in a way, a role play. That was the word I was looking for. Brain escapes me. And so I was able to do the telephone triage part of it and experience, what the initial questions might be when you approach the service, and then going for the first therapy session. And I got to spend a good couple of hours talking to a psychodynamic therapist in character again about this story that I'd kind of come up with. And it was really great. She would say, oh, that bit was good, that bit was good. This bit's not quite so common. You might want to do something that's a bit more like this, which is more typical. And it was great. I then started writing the monologue, got a little bit of feedback from the staff there on how to tweak it to make it more typical and everything. But I was really surprised that it was quite dark. It was probably the darkest thing I've written. And they were happy for me to just go and perform it. So I turned up to the event and performed this 30-minute monologue, or whatever, I think a 35-minute monologue. And it went down really well. People were saying it's basically my best work so far, which was great. And straight after the event, there was a lot of buzz about people saying, oh, you need to make a film with this, like you did with Civvy Street. And quite soon after that, Pennine Care Trust found the money to commission me to do the initial work, to do more research, to try and get a team together, to try and build a network of people who might want to get behind it and plan for it. Because I wanted this one to be another step up from Fallout and Civvy Street. I wanted this to be cinema quality, something that can really impact into the general public and not just be used as a training and awareness film. And not that Civvy Street and Fallout have just been used for that, but I wanted this to be just top quality in every department, in cast, in the script, in the production quality, in the equipment, and the outreach plan and everything. So I've done a ridiculous amount of work this last year or so trying to get this off the ground. We've had our hurdles to overcome. A lot of the funding we applied for, which we were hopeful and given quite a lot of hope that we would be successful, is unfortunately not materialized. So when we start filming in 2 weeks, 2 weeks tomorrow, actually. Well, 2 weeks on Wednesday. So the 3rd of September, I'm not sure what time this is going out. So we start filming on the 3rd of September.
Yep.
We've got everyone involved. Everyone's been great. That when the funding did fall through, everyone on board with the project said, you know what, we're on board, whatever, whether we get paid or not, which was great. And not a single person dropped out, which was just mind blowing. And even now, there's still people asking if they can get involved. And really good actors getting in touch, top professional actors that I really admire, saying, is there a small role I could play? Is there, even non-speaking parts? And I feel almost embarrassed offering the role to them. And it's just blown me away keen people have been to get involved because they realise it's an important film. We're still hoping that there's a few avenues we can get some funding from, but at the moment, a lot of our hope rests on the Indiegogo appeal, which you've mentioned. And there's a lot of, it's not just give us your money and see you later. It's a given receive thing. There's these perks that are on there where if you give a certain amount, you get a certain reward back, right from just a public thank you. So you might get a DVD or a signed Blu-ray or tickets to the premiere, and it just goes up with obviously the amount that's pledged. It's I mean we're about halfway through that now, and we're nowhere near what we hoped to raise.
Yeah.
Although that probably was a little bit ambitious, but
Well,
we're just hoping that if the word gets out in the networks of different networks of people, that it might just start to fly. And it's just about, people always say, don't they, in social media about something going viral. The hope is that something like that could happen. But the fact of the matter is, whatever we raise, we will make the film to the best quality we can, and it will have a life, and it will surpass anything we've done before. It's just about basically making it a little bit easier, trying to get better equipment, because the equipment, as talented as you are, if you've not got the right camera, it won't look as good. With all the will in the world, and just so whatever people can contribute, is whether it's £5 up to whatever they want to contribute. We're even looking for people who might want to be corporate sponsors. But it's all there on the page if people want to have a look at it. It's something that I'm really passionate about, and I hope people can read it and see the information that we've got on there as to why I'm passionate about it. There's someone I haven't mentioned yet is Dr. Barbara Van Dalen, who she's been a big supporter of my work since I met her at Canada House in London last year when I showed both films. And she's a huge figure in the States, particularly in veterans' mental health. She runs an organisation called Give an Hour, which encourages therapists all over the States. Obviously, it's a private health system over there, but she encourages therapists all over the country to give an hour of their time a week to a veteran. And it's just been a huge success. And she now she advises right up to White House level. She's just huge. And in 2012, she was named in Time magazine's 100 most influential people in the world. She's really, really big news over there, and she's keen to do stuff over in the UK. But what's great is that she's been right behind this project right from the start. She's been checking the script, making suggestions, and she wants to bring it over to the States and do a tour of the States with it once it's done. And it's great that people like that are behind it. And she does there's a bit on the Indiegogo page where she talks for about 5 minutes about why the film is needed and how it can be used and the power of film. And basically, she if you want to understand why you should get behind it, she'll tell you. Wow. Don't take it from me. Listen to her. Yeah, basically.
Well, I mean, just out of curiosity, even if you don't manage to get to the goal that you're after, please tell me you still get the money to use towards the film, whatever you've made so far.
Oh yes, we didn't make that mistake.
Good.
Whatever we raise, we get. I think it runs out on the 3rd. Yeah. And I think we get the money pretty quickly after that, whatever we raise.
One of the major reasons I want to get this straight out. So.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate that, and yeah, if it just generates a few more donations, it's more than worth it. And yeah, I just want people to know that whatever money we do get, it'll be to improve the quality of the film. It's not about us getting a better lunch at the end of the day or anything like that. It's just to make the job a bit easier and a bit more professional.
Yeah, of course. Right, so just if anybody's interested, and I hope they are, because to be quite honest with you, you need to get on these sites and see all this kind of stuff because it's brilliant. The page is at www.indiegogo.com, and it's under the project section, and it's a film called Unload, a film about PTSD and psychological Therapy. Okay, and you can find it there. I'm going to put links on the page just so people, and I'll put a link added onto the podcast itself, so people can find the page. We've got 16
And
days
do you know what
left.
you asked me before? Sorry, you asked me before, didn't you, about what the film was about? And I don't think I really explained it.
No,
Basically,
not yet.
The film is about it's about the journey through therapy for a veteran. It's about a character called Eddie, who's an army veteran, and about his journey through coming to terms that he has PTSD for one thing, and then being able to access the right care, and then just the difficulty of going through that process as well. It's not a case of as soon as you find the right therapist, it's plain sailing. There's still a lot of work and a lot of bravery needed and a lot of support needed from people around him. So it's about showing that journey and helping people understand that care is out there, and helping therapists, hopefully all over the world, realize what it is that veterans need, because it's based on like I say, an award-winning service that really has got it figured out. And so it's threefold really. It's to help mental health staff understand the issues and how to give better care and more effective care, and the people that obviously with the money behind the desks to know what needs to be commissioned and what doesn't, but also to get veterans and their families and basically anyone with a mental health problem who needs help to accept that they need help and to see that they're not alone, and to encourage them to go and seek the help that they need. And thirdly, and perhaps the thing that I'm most excited about is that thing I keep saying about breaking down the stigma and about getting people to realize what the reality of it is and that it could happen to anyone. And just getting that empathy, like I say, for people that are suffering.
Well, for the viewers out there, or listeners out there, one of the things I wanted to ask as well, I think I'm getting ahead of myself, maybe in the future, Panic Stations UK, the TV show, but never mind. But right now, for the listeners out there, what I'd like to make sure you do is just for the hell of it, even if you're not contributing, just please look at it to spread awareness and have a look. And you know what? Even if you donate a couple of quid, that's the main thing, because it's really important that these films are made, because if they're not made and they're not supported, there are people out there who are going to suffer, really, because there needs to be a knowledge base, and it's all about human kindness. So even if you thought, what's the minimum donation you can make? Is it just £5, or it can be anything?
I think that it's anything. I think if you want to just give £1, it literally is just a case of getting on there and taking a couple of minutes to register and put your card details in, and that's all it is. I think that the lowest perk we've put in is if people give £5, we will give a public thank you on Twitter and Facebook, and that's the lowest, and it obviously goes up from there in increments.
Well, put it this way: if you were to go to the pub, right, and you were to buy 2 pints, now generally that's a £5 these days, so why not do that into this? Because I think that's a better idea. It'd be like buying Pete and the cast and the crew just like a pint, going, well done for your efforts. I think fair play. So think of it that way, and I think that's a good way of looking at it. Going, look, well done for this. I think you've done a good job here. Is a £5, and I mean that's good, because I tell you what, I'll put my money where my mouth is. I'll put some money towards it. So
thank you very much.
No worries, and all I'll ask is that people just, I'm not not lynching them for money, and far from it. I'm just saying, but if anybody would like to, and they really feel passionate, and they're thinking, actually, this is a bloody good idea, and it is a good idea, please look at it. I'll put the link on the Facebook page. I'll put the link on the podcast as well. So all you're doing, if you're looking on iTunes, there'll be a link on iTunes when you look at the information about what the show's about. I'll put a link on the YouTube, because we put it on YouTube now. So I'll put the link onto that as well, and the information for YouTube. And again on SoundCloud, and hopefully we're going to get some more avenues where this podcast can be heard. So the more avenues, the more links, more so on and so forth. Now, just before we go, Pete, can I ask whether or not we can see any of your previous work? Is that out there that we can just click and have a look at? Or
do you know what? You read my mind. I was just going to say that if you go on the Indiegogo page, on the Unload fundraising page, and scroll down through the information, there are links to view Fallout, Civvy Street, and the 50 Kisses video as well. And we've just basically Fallout and Civvy Street we've made available just for the month that the crowdfunding is running, because normally we have to keep them private so that we can keep control of them and license them for use in like universities and training programs and things. But just to gain interest in this, so you've got until the 3rd of September to catch them before they're locked again. So if you do want to catch them, then please go on there and have a look and share that around, because even if we don't raise any money from you going on it, you might just, I don't know, might just make you think about something and might make you talk to someone else about it, and that's the whole point.
And to be ruthlessly honest, you guys are missing out a treat, because just from a entertainment point of view, from a drama point of view, take it from me, a guy who used to do a lot of theatre and stuff, and just take it from me, when you're looking at the performances, it's not amateurish. It's really nice to watch. The production's really good on these things, and they've given out a great message. I mean, a lot of people waste time watching things like EastEnders. You don't want to be watching EastEnders, you want to be watching this stuff. And the only way to be watching this stuff is to go onto the Indiegogo page and have a look on there. So there's your perk right now to have a look at whether or not you should be donating, or you want to, but you're just out of interest. You can actually watch the other stuff he's done, and that's fantastic as well. I think, come on, that's a perk in itself. And if you watched him, 20 minutes of your time, yeah, chuck a fiver in, you know what I mean? Or a couple of quid, whatever you can manage, it'd be really nice. So that's going to be out there. At the moment, it's currently going until the 3rd of September. I'd like to make a preemptive thank you for all the listeners, and obviously myself, because Pete has been... Sorry, I'm calling you Pete. You don't mind me calling you Pete. I'm just calling you instead of Peter. Or...
Oh, no. Everyone calls me Pete. That's no problem.
Oh, okay, sorry. I was just Pete. I'll call you Pete. I just want to say thank you from everybody who's listened to this, because I know there are people who are really eager to listen about the PTSD sufferers, the films that you've been doing. I'm going on the record to say this has actually been one of my favourite interviews so far, because it's been so fascinating to talk to you about it. And that's not to turn around and debase any of the interviews I've done prior to this. Far from it. They've been all great as well. But I've really enjoyed the conversation we've had here, because of it's expanded my knowledge base a bit more, which is why I think it's even better. Please, people, give it a look. It's really good. The film's going to be called Unload. Check it out. It's going to be really, really good. So this will be out ASAP. And then we'll carry on with the interviews with Jon Cross, which has been really, really good and really positively received. And I just want to say a big Panic Stations UK thank you to Peter. And hopefully, if you've got any other stuff in the future, if you want to pop on the show again, you are more than welcome. We'd love to have you on board.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's great what you're doing, Chris. It's fantastic. And that's why I was so keen to get on and talk to you. So, yeah, I've really enjoyed it. So I'm glad you've enjoyed it too. I'll speak to you soon.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you very much, Pete, and you take care.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Well, there we go. That was my interview with Peter Carruthers and about his PTSD film, Unload. Now, as I said before, please support the film any way you can. You can support it by going to Indiegogo and checking out there and going about Unload. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put some links onto this podcast and on the YouTube versions of this podcast, because we're now on YouTube. So as and when a weekly episode comes on, we will unload onto, as it were, onto YouTube as well. So I'd like to thank my guest again, Peter Carruthers, for all his impressive work and for his time, because he's a very, very busy man, to talk about his film. And obviously, I hope anybody that feels the need to give some money, like we discussed, please do, because it's like the cost of a pint or something. Just say, hey, well done. Do something like that. That's all good. So next week, we will be back to our regular scheduled discussions with Jon Cross. Will be part 2 of his interview. It's really good. Can't wait for you to listen to that. It's fantastic. So until next time, this is me, Chris Jones, saying again, thank you for all the guests involved. Thank you for your understanding of the fact that this has interrupted the Jon Cross interviews, and to, more importantly, stay safe, stay happy, do well, and obviously remember you're not alone. Until next time, bye-bye. Ah, yes. My friend Dan Kaiser was involved with 50 Kisses too. He was involved with the film Getting Ahead of Yourself.
Yes, I saw that. It was one of my favourite ones.
Wake up, dry your eyes. Time to face a long night with a brave smile. Dive headfirst into the dark with your shaking hands clenched in a soldier's heart. I know where you've been. I know where you've been. You're not alone in this swirling world. You have my hand. You have my hand. Dry your eyes, time to face a long night with a brave smile. Dive headfirst into the dark with your shaking hands clenched in a soldier's heart. I know where you've been. I know where you've been. You're not alone in this swirling world. You have my hand. You have my hand. You have